which makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org.
Hello, this is Jackie, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the Sunday, May 10th issue of the front section of the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Two rulings give the GOP optimism about midterms. 10 days, 10 more seats. Decisions on voting law in Virginia's districts reshape the outlook. By Shane Goldmacher and Tim Bulk. Just 2 weeks ago, Democrats felt increasingly emboldened about taking control of the House in November after seeming to fight the redistricting wars to a draw. But two court rulings, one by the Supreme Court and another by Virginia's top court, and an aggressive new push by red states to carve up congressional maps have delivered the Republican Party its biggest burst of momentum in many months. Put bluntly, Republicans have roughly 10 more House seats that favor them than they did just 10 days ago, and Democrats are suddenly grappling with a new landscape. This is now clearly closer than it was just a week and a half ago. Representative Brendan Boyle, a Pennsylvania Democrat, said of his party's chances to retake the House. Democrats are still widely seen as favored to win the House this fall. Republicans face a daunting political climate, saddled with President Trump's sagging approval ratings, high gas prices, and an unpopular war with Iran. In special elections and last year's races for governor, Democratic enthusiasm has swamped Republican turnout. I was anticipating about a 15 to 20 seat pickup before the last week and a half, Mr. Boyle said. Now I would be anticipating a 10 to 15 seat pickup. That would be more than enough to wrest the majority from the Republicans, who are clinging to a current edge of 217 to 212 seats. And history is not on the Republican side. The party in power almost always loses seats in the midterm elections. But after the latest map changes, winning the House majority will require Democrats to flip more seats in less hospitable territory. Bullish Republicans feel they are back in the game. Lord, grant me humility, James Blair, the Republican strategist who is overseeing Mr. Trump's political operation in the midterms, wrote on X on Friday after Virginia's top court struck down a recently enacted map meant to give Democrats 4 extra House seats. One of Speaker Mike Johnson's senior political aides interrupted the middle of a meeting in Texas where the Republican leader was on a fundraising swing to break the news, according to two people with knowledge of the conversation. Mr. Johnson later celebrated on the phone with Glenn Youngkin, the former Republican governor of Virginia, who had opposed the Democratic effort to redraw the state's lines. The last 10 days demonstrated the power and speed of the courts to shape the midterms, and the role of judges in the next phase of the redistricting battle. Recent legal actions are underway in Virginia, Tennessee, Florida, Louisiana, and Alabama that could still undo or block some of the potential Republican gains before the fall. The outcome of the legislative and legal fight, which has unfolded largely beyond the control of American voters, could be highly consequential. No party has made a net gain of more than a dozen House seats in a national election since the wave of 2018. Representative Yvette D. Clarke of New York, the chairwoman of the Congressional Black Caucus, said in an interview that Democrats were engaged in meetings on meetings on meetings on Friday to figure out how to respond in Democratic-controlled states. But the party's next steps were unclear, she said. noting that some potential paths seem to be closed because of the election calendar. It's not, Ms. Clark said, a good feeling. Good news for the GOP. The last few weeks stand as a remarkably important period in the battle for Congress this fall. On April 21st, Virginia voters narrowly passed a referendum to approve a newly gerrymandered Democratic-drawn map. Soon after, Representative Hakeem Jeffries of New York, the top Democrat in the House, held a news conference where he repurposed a slogan first used by a person close to Mr. Trump last year in the New York Times: "Maximum warfare everywhere, all the time." Republicans launched this gerrymandering war, Mr. Jeffries said, and we've made clear as Democrats that we're going to finish it. But the battle was just beginning. Just over a week later, the Supreme Court dropped a major ruling on the Voting Rights Act that unraveled decades-old protections for black voters in the South. The decision opened the door for Republican-led states to rip up their maps and dilute black voting power across multiple districts, effectively creating new GOP seats. Republicans moved swiftly. In Tennessee, they gerrymandered away the lone remaining Democratic seat. In Louisiana, the Republican governor took the highly unusual step of delaying House primaries, even after ballots had been mailed out to draw a new map. In Alabama, state officials petitioned the Supreme Court to allow them to use a map that would flip yet another Democratic seat. The very day that the Supreme Court issued its ruling, state legislators in Florida adopted a new congressional map that created up to 4 additional Republican-leaning seats. Signed, sealed, and delivered, Governor Ron DeSantis, a Republican, wrote on social media the next Monday as he signed it into law. Aiming to press forward with a redistricting offensive that Mr. Trump started, more Republican-led states are considering similar changes. The party's lawmakers were reminded of the high price of refusing the president's demands on Tuesday when a group of Republican legislators in Indiana, who had resisted his redistricting push, lost their primaries to MAGA-backed challengers. Then came Virginia, the biggest surprise of them all. Add all the seats up where Democrats lost or could lose ground, up to 4 seats in Virginia, up to 4 in Florida, 1 or 2 in Louisiana, 1 in Tennessee, and 1 in Alabama, and the total gives Republicans renewed optimism. Voters, of course, do have the final say, and Democrats are still aiming to flip 2 Virginia seats and compete in some of the new Florida districts. Chris Pack, a Republican strategist, said that those predicting a Democratic majority with confidence in 2026 were doing so prematurely. He pointed to his work for the House Republican campaign arm in 2020, when the party beat expectations to pick up seats even as Mr. Trump lost re-election. Everybody counted Republicans down and out in that cycle, and they're doing it again now, Mr. Pack said. When given the chance, Democrats like to step on the rake. Gearing up for November. Both parties are now bracing for a district-by-district fight this fall. Liz Smith, a Democratic political strategist who has worked with some of the party's House candidates this year through a group called The Bench, said the latest challenges to congressional maps only emphasized how hard-fought the election would be. Rather than navel-gazing and hand-wringing, we just need to focus on what will put us over the top here, Ms. Smith said, which is educating voters not just about Trump, but what his enablers in Congress have done. Chris Winkleman, the president of the leading House Republican super PAC, the Congressional Leadership Fund, derided the Democratic path to a majority as an expensive house of cards. As they wake up and realize they're overextended, they will find us well-resourced and locked into the core of the battleground, he said. At the end of April, the Cook Political Report, which handicaps political races, listed 217 House seats as at least leaning Democratic, meaning the party would have needed to win just a single toss-up race to seize the majority. As of Friday, Cook rated 208 seats as leaning Democratic, meaning the party would need to win 10 of the 18 toss-up races. The final maps are still in flux, less than 6 months before Election Day, with Democratic-aligned legal challenges underway to new Republican maps and redistricting efforts in Florida, Louisiana, and Tennessee. And more Republican-led states, including Kansas, Alabama, and South Carolina, are openly considering pressing for new maps. Democrats in some blue states where redistricting efforts had previously been considered are searching for answers or possible new moves. "I'm afraid for my party," said State Senator Arthur Ellis of Maryland, a Democrat who has been calling for the state to redraw its map before the midterms, adding that losses in the gerrymandering war were creating a real challenge for the party's efforts to reclaim the House majority. Mr. Ellis said he planned to send a letter over the weekend to other Maryland state lawmakers demanding that they pass new district lines in response to the Virginia decision. "We all need to show the courage to stand up and to make our voices heard in this very crucial, critical stage in the history of the United States of America," he said. The bigger picture. Many Democrats remain confident that 2026 will still wind up as a wave year for the party, and that Republicans will collapse under the weight of Mr. Trump's unpopularity. Jay Jacobs, the chairman of the New York Democratic Party, said that Republicans were still in very rough shape, and that their redistricting efforts could even backfire amid overwhelming Democratic enthusiasm. The longer gas prices remain high, the war in Iran continues, and all of the other craziness is promoted by Trump, things will get just better and better as we get close to November, Mr. Jacobs said. Former Speaker Kevin McCarthy, Republican of California, said that House Republicans were ecstatic after the Virginia ruling, and that the gerrymandering war had turned out to be a home run for Mr. Johnson. But he said that Democrats still had an advantage going into the midterm House races, and that the winnowing of the electoral map down to a small number of swing districts could cause lasting damage to the American democracy. "Anytime you don't allow the voters to pick their elected officials, that's a recipe long-term for disaster," Mr. McCarthy said. Why are teen takeovers? What are teen takeovers, and why are cities struggling to prevent them? This article is by Clyde McGrady, Emma Schartz, and Julie Bozeman. Washington. As the school year draws to a close, the perennial worry about teenage misbehavior and how to keep youth occupied in the summer has a new name with ominous undertones: teen takeovers. In Detroit, Chicago, Atlanta, the nation's capital, and elsewhere, large gatherings of young people have popped up in downtown parks and neighborhoods. They can be noisy, boisterous, and at times violent, their impact often amplified on television, especially by conservative media outlets like Fox News. And city leaders have begun to pay more attention. It has gotten worse when it comes to the bad behavior, Larry Snelling, the superintendent of the Chicago Police Department, said in an interview. Kids just start to fight, so they get increasingly more violent. Societal anxiety over juvenile delinquency is not new. A family court judge told the New York Times in 1952, "The reasons for children getting into trouble are the same yesterday as forever: revolt, rebellion, and the need for self-expression, denied to them somehow in a natural way." At that time, authorities attributed the extreme behavior of youth to the Korean War, national and international insecurity, and a lack of mental health treatment. Now it's social media and the long tail of COVID-19, with its resulting Zoom from home generation. But what is undeniably new is the role that platforms like Instagram and TikTok play in the speed of organization and the scale of assembly. And the larger the gatherings, the better the chance that something can go wrong. Detroit teens do have a thing for pulling out guns while fighting, said Malaysia McCline, 15, who recalled stumbling into a teen takeover last month after the Tigers' opening day. She and friends had noticed a growing crowd at the city's waterfront that included a former classmate she had lost touch with. It was fun, but by nightfall, some became rowdier, yelling and running. Police officers moved in. I was scared, she said. Law enforcement officials across the country are enjoying a period of good news. Crime overall in cities that include Chicago, Houston, Los Angeles, and Columbus, Ohio, has dropped significantly in recent years. Homicides nationally are poised to hit their lowest rate in more than a century. Data shows a recovery from pandemic highs. But the pandemic exacerbated a decline in the amount of time that teenagers spend going out and socializing. And socializing is a natural impulse, said Lawrence Steinberg, a psychology professor who studies adolescent development. It's bound to burst out. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the front section of the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Just what should be considered a teen takeover is nebulous. On May 3rd, near Oklahoma City, at least 23 people were injured in a shooting at what police labeled an unsanctioned lakeside party. Like classic takeovers, it had been advertised on social media and drew a crowd of teens and people in their early 20s. Ahead of summer, some urban leaders have tried to make inroads with teens, hoping to channel their urge to socialize into more constructive activities that keep them safe and prevent bad actors from disrupting the peace. After a pair of teen takeovers in Detroit last month, Mayor Mary Sheffield summoned the youthful organizers to her office. They hashed out ideas like late-night basketball at city recreational centers, new public space developments, and a new youth advisory board. They wanted a place to get out, be free, have fun, and hang out, Ms. Sheffield said in an interview. It's not that easy, said Ashley Jennings, 17, who serves on the youth advisory panel for the Detroit Board of Police Commissioners. It takes money and transportation to get to the suburbs, where teenagers can bowl or watch a movie and avoid the city's 10 p.m. curfew. Teen takeovers, by contrast, are free and accessible. The panel provides Ms. Jennings with a platform to authorities that most teens don't have. When somebody shuts you up so much, you have no choice but to think your voice is not important, she said. Lewis Custard, another Detroit teenager, agreed. What adults call teen takeovers, he called breaking free of the constraints that social media, gangs, and excessive policing impose on teen lives. What I see is a bunch of kids trying to escape from the modality of their regular day-to-day life, said Mr. Custard, 16. Some of the panic over teen takeovers has echoes in worries over wilding in the late 1980s and super predators in the 90s. There was a lot of dog whistling there about the fact that these are black kids who are gathering together in these large groups, and we should be afraid of them, Mr. Steinberg said. Black and Latino youth gatherings are more likely to be assumed as criminal, said Kristen Henning, a Georgetown University law professor who specializes in juvenile justice. White children in skate parks in the 80s and 90s did not generate nearly the same level of surveillance and arrests as black gatherings, she said. That doesn't mean concerns over rowdy teen gatherings are confined to white people or conservative media outlets. Small business owners and neighbors of all kinds are vexed. Every bar and restaurant, corner store, or hamburger shop, or pizza slice place, they want customers. And customers don't come back when there are kids jumping on top of hoods of cars, running down the street, knocking people over, threatening people, said Chuck Thies, a political consultant in Washington who advised a former mayor, Vincent Gray. In the nation's capital, the issue has been made more urgent by the district's Democratic mayoral primary in June. An economy sagging under the weight of Trump administration job cuts and the threat of still more budget reductions by Congress. Police are taking notice. Officers in Chicago monitor social media for what they call teen trend announcements and receive tips from parents, community organizers, and school officials when a takeover is posted. They first try to stop it from happening, talking to teenagers, parents, and principals. Superintendent Snelling estimated that the department has headed off hundreds of takeovers. In the heat of summer in Chicago, there can be several planned each day, he said. For takeovers, it doesn't stop. The department makes sure that officers are stationed at the scene. There's zero tolerance for when we see crimes being committed, Mr. Snelling said. We will take someone into custody and charge them accordingly. In March, a takeover in Chicago's Hyde Park neighborhood near the University of Chicago left a trail of property damage after teens stomped on car hoods and broke windshields. 2 weeks later, parents and educators on the city's south side decided to organize a parent takeover, which drew more than 60 people who stood outside a coffee shop and monitored the area. Trez V. Pugh III, the coffee shop owner, said he thinks the young people are just bored. Some kids are just looking for attention, and they don't realize there are repercussions, consequences for their actions, he said. All of this had brought back the debate over curfews in Detroit and Chicago and elsewhere. Last week, the District of Columbia Council voted 8-5 to give the mayor authority to declare 8 p.m. curfew zones, to prohibit large teen gatherings in certain areas, and require youth event programming whenever the mayor or police chief establishes such zones. The measure needs approval from the mayor and Congress and likely wouldn't be in effect at the beginning of summer. Last summer, Mayor Brandon Johnson in Chicago vetoed a curfew measure passed by the city council. Even proponents say such curfews are at best a temporary solution. Teens are especially leery. In Atlanta, Haley Irving, 17, and Devin Mitchell, 16, delivered a speech in March titled Reimagining Third Spaces at a conference for the city's public school students. In front of school board members, a superintendent, and aides for Mayor Andre Dickens, Ms. Irving and Mr. Mitchell argued that teenagers needed their own spaces, modeled after co-working spots downtown, to do homework and art projects, host charity events, or hold pop-up shops to sell goods and services. The mayor's chief of staff awarded the duo a $50,000 grant to help make that concept happen. The issue is having to deal with being seen as a criminal when you're trying to access fun as a kid, Ms. Irving said. There are issues with safety when safety isn't adequately built for you. There are several pictures that accompany this article. One is a photo of 2 police officers walking what seems to be a teenager towards their police vehicle. And the caption reads, "Detaining a participant in a teen takeover in the Hyde Park neighborhood of Chicago last month." Below that is another picture of 2 teens, one boy, one girl, and this is Devin Mitchell, 16, and Haley Irving, 17. They say teenagers in Atlanta need their own spaces in the city. Suspect in subway death was let out of hospital by Christopher Magg and Anusha Baya. A 76-year-old man died on Friday after being shoved down the stairs at the 18th Street subway station in Manhattan. And the police arrested a suspect who had been arrested multiple times in recent months and had been discharged from Bellevue Hospital's psychiatric ward just hours before. The victim, Ross Falzone, landed on his head at the bottom of the stairs and suffered a traumatic brain injury, a fractured spine, and a fractured rib after a stranger rushed forward and pushed him, the police said. Mr. Falzone had been walking north on 7th Avenue toward the subway station in the Chelsea neighborhood on Thursday evening, said Brad Weeks, Assistant Commissioner of Public Information for the police department. Walking about 30 yards behind him was the stranger, according to surveillance footage from the scene. As Mr. Falzone reached the station, the man rushed forward and pushed him down the stairs. He was taken to Bellevue, where he died shortly before 3 a.m. on Friday. The death sparked outrage at City Hall. Mayor Zoran Mandani quickly called for an investigation into how Bellevue handled the discharge of the suspect and suggested that institutional problems at the hospital might have led to the random attack. I am horrified by the killing of Ross Falzone and the circumstances that led to it, Mr. Mamdani said in a news release on Friday, in which he ordered an immediate investigation on what steps should have been taken to prevent this tragedy. Police identified the suspect as Ramel Burke, 32. In the 3 months preceding the attack, Mr. Burke was arrested 4 times, Mr. Weeks said, including an arrest on February 2nd in connection with an assault on a Port Authority police officer. Mr. Burke's most recent interaction with police began at around 3:30 p.m. Thursday when he approached a group of New York police officers outside the 17th Precinct Station House on East 51st Street. He grabbed a stick from a pile of garbage on the street and approached the officers, who told him to drop the stick. When he did, officers placed Mr. Burke in a police vehicle and drove him to Bellevue, where he was admitted to the emergency room at around 3:40 p.m. Mr. Burke was taken to the hospital's comprehensive psychiatric emergency program for evaluation and treatment, Mr. Weeks said, and was released from the hospital 1 hour later. He was just a mile and a half from the hospital when he encountered Mr. Falzone around 9:30 p.m. on Thursday. On Friday afternoon, police officers found Mr. Burke in Penn Station, where they arrested him. He was in custody on Friday evening. It was unclear Friday if Mr. Burke had a lawyer. The mayor said he had requested help from the New York State Department of Health, which will investigate the decision to release Mr. Burke from Bellevue and conduct a review of similar cases at the hospital. The state agency also will investigate psychiatric evaluation and discharge procedures across New York City health and hospitals, the city's public hospital system, according to the news release. Mr. Falzone was a retired high school teacher who lived alone for many years in an apartment building on the Upper West Side. His friends were shocked by his death. They shared memories of an affable but private man who rarely spoke about his family or personal life. Mr. Falzone had been recovering from a recent surgery and seemed more mobile and happy, said Mark Stager, 78, Mr. Falzone's next-door neighbor on a tree-lined block of West 85th Street. He was known as a cheerful yapper, said Brial Wexman, a neighbor. He was the kind of New Yorker who enjoyed chatting with neighbors about historical details of his building and seeing performances at Lincoln Center with his friends. He was always out and about, said Ms. Waxman, 35, who often returned to her apartment at midnight or 1 a.m. to find Mr. Falzone arriving home at the same time. I was like, I don't know if I'm proud of you or embarrassed of myself, she remembered telling him. Mr. Falzone had wide taste in music, opera, classical, jazz, pop, and neighbors could tell he was home when they heard notes escaping from under his apartment door, Mr. Stager said. He was a helpless old guy, said Mr. Stager, who added that he was disappointed and shocked, frankly, that somebody could do such a thing as shove such a defenseless person down the stairs. When Ms. Waxman moved into the building 5 years ago, Mr. Falzone was among the first people to welcome her, she said. He once brought a package to her door that had been delivered to the wrong unit and shared that what is now a blank wall had once been a fireplace. Ms. Waxman sat in her living room on Friday and cried as she talked, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. She remembered Mr. Falzone as just overall nice, talkative, a genuine human. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the front section of the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. A Frontier jet hits a person on a runway in Denver, by John Yoon. A Frontier Airlines plane struck a person on the runway as it was taking off from Denver International Airport late Friday, the Federal Aviation Administration said. The pilots aborted the takeoff and the plane was evacuated after reporting an engine fire. The Airbus A321 jet, with 224 passengers and 7 crew members, was leaving on Flight 4345 to Los Angeles International Airport when the collision took place, according to the statements from Frontier and the FAA. Smoke was reported from inside the plane, and the passengers were safely evacuated using emergency slides as a precaution, Frontier said. The FAA said in a statement on Saturday morning that the plane struck a person on runway 17L as it was taking off and that the agency was investigating. There were no details immediately available about the person who was hit or their condition. A recording posted by the ATC.com app captured the pilots describing the incident. "We're stopping on the runway," a pilot told the air traffic controller tower. "We just hit somebody. We have an engine fire." Later, a pilot told the tower that an individual was walking across the runway. The crew told air traffic control that it was evacuating the plane on the runway because of the smoke inside. Denver Airport said in a statement that the episode happened about 11:20 p.m., and that the firefighters had put out an engine fire on the plane. The passengers were taken back to the terminal by bus, it added. The plane came to a sudden stop on the runway soon after it had started accelerating for takeoff, according to the data replay from the tracking website Flight Radar 24. Frontier's headquarters are in Denver. The airline and the airport both said that investigations were underway. The airport said the National Transportation Safety Board had been notified. In a statement, the NTSB said that it was working to gather information alongside the FAA and local agencies. Denver Airport did not report major disruptions to flight operations. Runway 17L, which was closed after the collision, is one of the 6 runways at the airport. Reviving U.S. waterways by removing failing dams, by Kara Buckley. Even though the 2 dams spanning the river in Bedford, PA were old, troublesome, and functionally useless, locals just couldn't quit them. The dams were built for swimming and fishing, but so much silt had built up that the river was mere inches deep. They trapped debris, worsened flooding, and thwarted migratory fish. They were also falling apart, drawing warnings from the Environmental Protection Agency that they would have to be replaced, repaired, or removed at local taxpayer expense. Yet the people of Bedford had grown attached to the dams, which dated back 50 years. Some also believed, wrongly, that the barriers housed important utility wires or cables. Somebody always came forward and gave a concrete reason those dams could not possibly be removed, said Kenny Fetterman, who sits on the Bedford Borough Council. He was determined to find a fix and spearheaded an effort that led to the dam's removal last summer. Now the river is so much cleaner, said Mr. Fetterman, who as far as he knows is not related to Senator John Fetterman, Democrat of Pennsylvania. The quality of water has improved drastically. There's freshwater clams in there. It was part of what might be called the undamming of America. Last year, more sections of the country's rivers were reconnected thanks to dam removals than any other time in history, according to the nonprofit group American Rivers. In 2025, more than 100 dams were dismantled in 30 states, reconnecting around 4,900 miles of waterways, including 156 miles of a branch of the Juanita River that are now reconnected thanks to the removal of Bedford's 2 dams. The resulting free-flowing waterways are healthier, cooler, and less prone to algal blooms, and serve as vital habitat for migratory fish and other aquatic life. They're also safer. The average age of America's dams is 60 years. While dams needed for flood regulation, water storage, or irrigation must stay in place, many no longer serve their original purpose and are at risk of collapse. Our dams aren't getting younger, said Serena McLean, who oversees the dam removal program for American Rivers. With more extreme weather, more and more of these structures are failing over time. If we don't remove them, Mother Nature is going to do it for us. It's unclear exactly how many dams are scattered across America. The National Inventory of Dams, compiled by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, lists about 92,000 dams, nearly 17,000 of which are deemed high hazard risks should they fail. But according to the National Aquatic Barrier Inventory, there are hundreds of thousands of smaller and unregulated structures that block waterways. The majority were built to create swimming and fishing holes or reservoirs for water supplies, or to generate power and irrigate farm fields. Most are privately owned and increasingly obsolete, making them a liability both for the people and the environment. Low-head dams, which are designed to have water flow over them, create a recirculating current downstream that can trap people and debris. They're known as drowning machines and have caused nearly 800 reported fatalities. There's a broad bipartisan support for dam safety and repair, according to Del Shannon, a geotechnical engineer and dam expert. We are one of the few areas where those guys can agree on, Mr. Shannon said, who helped write the American Society of Civil Engineers Infrastructure Report Card, which gave American dams a D+ grade. But federal money allocated to rehabilitate and remove dams is far less than what's needed, Mr. Shannon said. A 2025 report by the Association of State Dam Safety Officials estimated that rehabilitating all non-federally owned dams would cost about $165.2 billion. The federal government owns just 4% of dams. While the 2021 infrastructure law earmarked $3 billion for dam repair and removal, Congress has since reallocated $364 million. Under the Trump administration, many grants for dam removal and safety have also stalled amid budget cuts, and it has pushed back against some removals. In April, the Trump administration intervened in PG&E's decommissioning of 2 hydropower dams in Northern California. The The two dams have not produced electricity since 2021 because of equipment failure, and the utility determined that fixing the equipment didn't make economic sense. But the administration said they were needed for water security. Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins wrote on X that the decommissioning reflected a policy of putting fish over people. Hydropower dams have been a source of inexpensive energy, but the cost of repairs and relicensing can outstrip the benefits, said Desiree Toulios, a professor in biological and ecological engineering at Oregon State University. And fewer than 3% of the country's dams generate power. In 2023 and 2024, 4 major hydroelectric dams on the Klamath River in Oregon and California were dismantled, the biggest dam removal project in history. It was touted as an environmental win, but the main reason Pacific Corp, the owner, opted to take down the dams is because it was cheaper than leaving them in place. The Trump administration has since cut funds for the river's restoration. Dr. Toulos said there are some scenarios where it doesn't make sense to remove dams, such as when stored sediment is contaminated and remediation proves too expensive. But, she added, the economic and environmental costs of maintaining obsolete dams never seems to justify any potential benefits. She noted that big dams are outnumbered by smaller ones that often do more harm than good. The vast majority of these dinky little dams, Dr. Toulos said, there's just so many of these deadbeat dams on the landscape. Nothing much happened until 2021, when Mr. Fetterman, a musician, landlord, and lifelong skateboarder, was elected to the Borough Council. He wanted to take in all the accounts of Bedford's dams that were decidedly deadbeat. After the dams were built, they quadrupled the river's width and trapped the swept-away trees, other debris, and sediment. It wasn't uncommon to see carp flopping in the upstream shallows while thwarted perch milled below. In the summers, you could pretty much walk across the river and not get your ankles wet, Jeff Rinshield, the former borough council member, said. As time passed, the borough received warnings that the dams would have to be removed or repaired. But the council determined that rehabilitating the dams would cost local taxpayers millions of dollars. When Mr. Fetterman was elected, he wanted to improve Bedford's riverfront, and removing the dams was the key. After speaking with various government agencies, he eventually got in touch with American Rivers. A representative, Lisa Hollingsworth Sedgey, presented a plan to the Borough Council, as well as an irresistible sweetener. American Rivers could take out the dams at no cost to the local community. The removal plan was approved. The removals cost $230,000, paid for by foundation money and federal funds. Last summer, excavators drove into the river in Bedford and began taking the two dams apart. Within weeks, both were gone. And at first, the people of Bedford were aghast. Without the dams stretching it out sideways, the river contracted, exposing a bleak mudscape riddled with debris. One day, Mr. Fetterman waded into the silty terrain to pull out what looked like half-dozen car tires. He ended up spending a week there hauling out 118 tires, while getting an earful for being the guy responsible for the mess. People would go down and they'd say, "Well, this looks terrible. This is awful. I can't believe you would do this," Mr. Fetterman recalled. He told them to wait. Nature is going to correct itself, he said. Slowly, over the next few months, the river flushed itself out and began finding its channels again. Last fall, Mr. Fetterman planted 35 pounds of winter rye seeds along its banks, An additional $150,000 worth of native plants, shrubbery, and trees is set to go along the banks in the coming weeks. A multi-million-dollar restoration of the riverfront park, paid for by the state, is planned. Nobody complains now, said Barbara Deal, the borough manager. Mr. Rinscheid said that when he strolls to the riverfront now, he spots perch and rainbow trout swimming in parts of the river that have been largely fishless for the past half-century. I've had countless people tell me it's amazing all the wildlife we're seeing. I didn't think taking out those dams would make a difference, Mr. Fetterman said. Now everything can flow freely and clearly the way it was intended. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the front section of the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Who Are You Getting Health Advice From? By Teddy Rosenbluth. Want to lose weight? Live longer? Lower your stress levels? Control your blood sugar? Or optimize your sleep? An influencer wants to tell you how to do it, and a new report finds many Americans are listening. Half of U.S. adults under 50 are now getting health and wellness information from influencers or podcasters, according to an analysis published Thursday by the Pew Research Center. The report, which analyzed the profiles of nearly 13,000 health and wellness accounts with at least 100,000 followers on social media, also offers a window into who exactly is giving that advice. Fewer than 1 in 5 were conventional professionals such as doctors, dentists, or nurses. Many listed another qualification such as diet or life coaches, entrepreneurs, or parents. The study found that these accounts had vast reach. 8% had over 1 million followers, and about half of consumers of this content said that the influencers had helped them better understand how to be healthy. We're absolutely underestimating wellness influencers, said Mariah Wellman, who studies digital wellness communities at Michigan State University. They no longer just shape what we buy or wear, she said, but also influence our lifestyle choices and what we put in our bodies. The fact that many of the most influential health creators are not a part of the medical establishment is not surprising, said Rachel Moran, a health misinformation researcher at the University of Washington. In fact, that may be large part of their appeal. Trust in government health agencies has been falling since the pandemic. And while most Americans still trust their doctors' health recommendations, the share that say they do not has also ticked down in recent years. Coaches and entrepreneurs, which made up nearly 50% of the top influencers, are able to toe the line, Dr. Moran said. They can claim professional health experience without being seen as part of the establishment. Nearly 1 in 5 accounts gave no explanation for why they were qualified to post about health and wellness topics. Even so, they were able to grow huge followings on platforms like Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. They didn't need to establish that kind of credibility or experience to amass those audiences, said Galen Stocking, Associate Director of Research at Pew. Some of the influencers with the largest followings included Jay Shetty, who trained as a monk and now posts mental health advice, Dr. Munib Shah, a dermatologist, who posts about skincare, and Jen Selter, who posts about fitness and healthy snacks. The Pew researchers found that some of the influencers cited their personal experiences, such as managing their own medical condition or being a parent, as their primary qualification. Dr. Wellman said she understood why personal anecdotes were so compelling. Her previous research had found that vulnerability and transparency are increasingly important factors in people's decisions about whom to trust for health information. Sharing their own weight loss experience or cancer diagnosis is a fast way to build trust. But there are dangers to applying someone's experience to your life, Dr. Moran said. The misinformation part comes in, not necessarily because something isn't true, but because it just can't be generalized, she said. Users reported hearing about a wide range of topics: weight loss, mental health, dietary supplements, personal appearance, and more. Dr. Wellman, who has studied these influencers since 2016, when the content was mainly focused on fitness, said this showed just how expansive the wellness industry had become. The new report did not examine whether influencers' posts were evidence-based, but in a follow-up survey, the researchers found that about 20% of Americans who consume wellness content online said the information was extremely or very different from the advice of their own medical providers. Many doctors and public health experts are wary of the rise of wellness influencers, who are often behind viral health misinformation, like the claim that sunscreen causes cancer and nicotine can reverse Alzheimer's. Some doctors have tried competing online for the trust and attention of social media users, either by creating their own explanatory content or by debunking misinformation from other content creators. Last month, the American Medical Association launched a new podcast, Health versus Hype, that aims to fact-check wellness trends and health claims from influencers filling our social media feeds every day. While some physicians have found large audiences online, they are still in the minority. Health misinformation researchers are skeptical that flooding social media with medical professionals is the answer. Dr. Wellman cautioned that they would have a hard time reaching the people who don't agree with them. Dr. Moran said they would also have to grapple with an inconvenient truth on the internet. Nuanced, evidence-based health information often doesn't travel as far as the promise of a miracle cure or an antidote from an influencer. They offer certainty, but this product take agency over your life in this way. Sign up for this program of mine, Dr. Moran said. Medicine can't always offer you that. Ruling on redistricting is a blow to Spanberger by Campbell Robertson. Democrats in Virginia seemed to be on top of the political world in last November's election. They won every statewide office and flipped 13 seats in the legislature, gains that surprised even optimistic Democrats. And they were hopeful that they might flip as many as 4 seats in Congress this year after passing a resolution to redraw the state's congressional map. Standing to reap the benefits of a surge in Democratic power was Abigail Spanberger, the newly elected governor and the first woman to hold the office. What a difference 6 months makes. Democrats were waylaid on Friday by a Virginia Supreme Court decision striking down a new congressional map that had been narrowly approved last month by voters in a referendum. And though the Democrats' redistricting push began before Governor Spanberger was even elected, the court's decision was nonetheless a blow to her, the leader of a party that was feeling bullish just a few weeks ago. During her campaign, she was initially skeptical of the gerrymandering effort Democratic leaders were undertaking. But after their efforts cleared one hurdle after another, Ms. Spanberger offered public, if measured, support for the proposed map, which led to criticism from both sides of the political aisle. She is the leader of the party, said Douglas Wilder, a Democrat governor of Virginia from 1990 to 94. And the new map was her party's priority, which gave her a big, if not necessarily welcome, stake in its fate. In a statement on Friday, Ms. Spanberger said she was disappointed by the ruling. She added that her focus as governor will be on ensuring that all voters have the information necessary to make their voices heard this November in the midterm elections, because in those elections, we, the voters, will have the final say. In the first few months of her term, Ms. Spanberger has found herself routinely buffeted by lawmakers on her left and right. Her relationship with Democratic leaders in the General Assembly has been prickly. Some of the legislators have openly criticized the changes she has proposed to legislation, accusing her of hamstringing long-sought Democratic priorities. After she sent lawmakers her suggested amendments to a variety of bills they had passed, the legislature just sent many of her original versions back, daring her to veto or sign as is. Some Democratic legislators have begun to refer to her derisively as 141, as if she were an extra member of the General Assembly. Republicans have had their own criticisms, faulting her for being too supportive of the Democratic agenda. In pursuing some Democratic goals, even those she campaigned on, like rejoining a multi-state pact to cut carbon emissions, some Republicans have accused her of betraying her pledge to be a bipartisan leader. She's got issues with her own Democrat caucus in both the House and the Senate. They do not seem to be reading from the same sheet of music, said State Senator Glenn Sturvant, a Republican. But at the end of the day, she's the chief executive, and the buck stops with her. Her declining poll numbers appear to reflect this discontent. Though she tried to draw attention to the nuts and bolts policies that she signed into law, like a minimum wage hike and an expansion of paid sick leave, these were overshadowed by the gerrymandering push, which spurred tens of millions of dollars in political advertising. On the campaign trail, she said she had no plans to redraw the state's congressional maps. When Democratic lawmakers introduced the redistricting amendment in the final days of the campaign, she said she was not opposed to keeping the state's options open. Once the amendment was put before voters, Ms. Spanberger urged people to vote for it, but she emphasized that it was only temporary and that the important thing was that the people had a chance to weigh in. This more measured approach frustrated some of the more full-throated proponents of the redistricting effort, while doing little to endear her opponents. It's not like taking a morally principled stance would have been without cost, said Brian Cannon, a Democrat who helped lead a group opposing the amendment. But it turned out the politically expedient way to come away with even steeper costs. Governors have had bumpy starts before and recovered. Ralph Northam, the Democrat to hold governor's office, was all but written off early in his term when he was found to have been wearing blackface in a yearbook photo. But by his third year, in large part because of his handling of COVID, his public approval had recovered considerably. A host of things are currently going wrong for Democrats in Virginia, including a federal raid last week on the office of a powerful state senator. Mr. Wilder, the former governor, says this moment could present an opportunity for Spanberger to put her party on the right track and redefine her still fresh tenure. Abigail's got to be thinking, what am I going to do for the rest of my term? Mr. Wilder said. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the Sunday, May 10th issue of the front section of the New York Times. We read from the front section of the New York Times every Sunday at 1 p.m. Your reader has been Jackie. Thank you for listening.
Coming up next in the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, we have a reading of the New York Times opinion page. Following that, at 3 o'clock, the New York Times Arts and Leisure, and at 4 o'clock, a rebroadcast of this morning's Buffalo News. Radio Reading mails out a large print program schedule to our listeners every other month. If you have not received a Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service large print program schedule in the mail, please call us at 716-821-5555. We will make sure that you receive one every other month. A Braille version of the schedule is also available upon request. Our number again is 716-821-5555. The following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or have another print disability